Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to week 11 of the Kraken Power Rankings. Now, thanks to the lucrative contracts with our prior sponsors, it is my, and I quote, goddamn honor and privilege to promote this week's sponsor. This week's episode is brought to you by Jacob Sear. He's better than you, and he knows it. With Jacob Sear, there is no product, and there is no service. We're all just lucky to bask in his presence. Are you feeling dumb today? Jacob Sear will be there to affirm your feelings and share how he avoids being dumb and never wrong every day. Are you a struggling parent? Well, look no further than Father of the Year, Jacob Sear, for prime parenting advice. He's willing to instruct you on all things parenting, from how to shut the fuck up, all the way to doing your grocery shopping the correct way. Remember, Jacob Sear, he's better than you, and he knows it. So yeah, we didn't, with the contracts that we had before, we were able to bring in a lot of extra funds to fund this podcast here. So we decided to do one pro bono. So big shout outs to Jacob Sear for giving us the opportunity, the goddamn honor and privilege to share his not business. So no, Jake did not even ask for that. I did that by myself. So without further ado, why don't we just head over to Power Rankings here? We can just do a little bit of an overview of the week. Now, I think I like this extra day to sort of digest everything and to, judge teams post, fab spending, waiver pickups, and all that. So week 10 was I think this was the highlight right here. Was Jake versus Elliott. That went down to pretty much like the last quarter of the game. And I didn't watch it, but I even like that last drive, Elliott was saying like it really kind of came down to there. James Cook had, a lot of carries, had like a 40-something yard run, and then I guess Josh Allen missed a wide open. That didn't miss. He had a wide open Dalton Kincaid in the end zone, but decided to run it in himself, as Josh Allen does pretty frequently. So most everything else in here, I mean, this was a matchup for a while. This was kind of close for a while until Chris pulled away. Stacks, I mean, that's probably his best game of the season. A lot of these are pretty much blowouts. This game could have been close, but Diggs didn't really perform. Zach had a really, really tough week there. Morganelli once again. Look at that, points over projection. Is that the highest? I think 50, 58. Yeah, that's the highest for sure over projected for anyone. Thanks to Brian Robinson having an insane game right there, 30 points. That was pretty crazy. He had 119 receiving yards, pretty cool. And that's with ETN getting 6. So every week it seems like there's some monster performance on Morganelli's side. Look at this non-output from the receivers. With guys on bye. Look at this. He has Puka on bye, Devontae Smith on bye, Patrick Mahomes on bye, and Jefferson still injured, and that's 160 points. I mean, there's just always somebody here. Great acquisition, Rachaad White. I think that was, a 5th-round pick. I remember at the time thinking that was a little bit steep. But not at all. I mean, Rachaad White has been, I think, pretty consistent since Morganelli got him. Maybe a bad week here or there, but overall, just really, really solid. Let's take a look. Actually, let's take a look real quick. I mean, look at that. And I know last time I commented on his extremely efficient receiving. Again, though, I mean, he only one missed target. That's wild. His rushing efficiency isn't really that good, but I mean, it's basically Eckler-esque. He doesn't look at all like Austin Eckler out there, but the numbers are very Eckler-esque. I just maybe move some of these rushing attempts over to receptions for Eckler there, but it's very, I mean, that's a great acquisition. That could be one of those league-winning acquisitions there. We'll see. The schedule is fine. New Orleans is definitely tough. I think he'll be fine against Atlanta, but I don't know who he's playing week 14. But anyway, I'm spending a lot of time on Morganelli, and he doesn't deserve it. He hasn't had the wheel of names spun on him for today. He had that last week, so I need to move on. But just I had to go over the overview. So without further ado, we're gonna click to spin. We're gonna see who we are chatting about today. I should put on some background music here. Hopefully that's not too loud. Feels a little bit loud, but it'll be fine. All right, so Draft Pick Fan Club. This is not really not much to talk about on this one here. I'm actually gonna The music is loud on my end, so you probably won't be able to hear it. But I'll turn it down just a little bit there. So we'll go to Draft Pick Fan Club. We'll analyze this team. There's not much to analyze, right? Because he sold some of his guys, but we could find stuff to talk about. There's definitely something to talk about because he could still. He has a lot of players that I think can provide value, but are not super tradable. The first one that comes to mind is Jahan Dotson, who had a 0 week basically last week, right? Yeah, he had a 0 week. Had these 2 big weeks, so he could torch somebody. In one of these weeks coming up, like this upcoming week. He just has to be playing someone, at least Jay. So this is a pretty inconsequential matchup. But he could spoil someone, is I guess what I'm getting at. But just looking top down, you see, Sam Howell. I guess I want to look at this at the perspective of what he has for keepers, because that's pretty much where we are at this point. But Howell, those are good numbers. They have no defense. They sold the rest of whatever defense they had left. So it's just going to be Howell slinging the ball repeatedly. Fantasy-wise, he's definitely a QB1. There's multiple. Look at all these 300-yard games, especially lately. This is a fine schedule, right? Giants are going to be easy to throw against. Dallas, they were going to find themselves down pretty quickly, so I wouldn't be surprised to see a good matchup here, or a good point total here. These are all basically 20-plus point, pretty easily, I'd say, outcomes for. So is this someone that McGovern keeps next year? Maybe. I wouldn't expect him to, because he came out and said that he wants to keep A-Chain. He'd prefer to keep Waddle, so that does imply that Waddle is not on the block, but you can overpay for him, which I don't think anyone's going to do, because contenders aren't going to want to have to pay for his keeper value, right? So McGovern's planning on keeping him. You have to pay for Waddle's services and also basically pay McGovern for next year too, which just doesn't really make sense if you're trying to compete just this year. So Waddle's not going to get traded. Nico Collins is a guy I really like. Nico Collins. There's just there's gonna be a lot of passing volume on the offense, as we know. He's had some big games, but there's also just there are a lot of players on that offense that Stroud can throw to, right? The Nico Collins is their wide receiver one. I joked about him being like wide receiver 3, but he has the build and the skill set of a wide receiver 1. But Stroud likes to spread the ball around. He loves Tank Dell. I think that's been well documented that he loves Tank Dell. So, but Nico Collins does have the skills to sort of overcome that kind of favoritism. So, but again, what do you trade for Nico Collins? And McGovern joked that he's an 8th, but what am I don't think I'd be willing to offer really much more than that. Maybe a 7th. I'm not going to try and get him. I don't want Nico Collins plus Tank Dell. Plus, and I think I like my wide receivers as they are. And I find it tough for anyone to really want to pay for Nico Collins. So I don't expect him to get moved. Jahan Dotson, I don't expect him to get moved. Ford could get moved. I don't see McGovern keeping him next year. And he could still, there's obviously Kareem Hunt to worry about, but Ford has been good in his own right. These are solid performances. This is a guy I could see Ford getting traded. Warren has keeper potential, so you'd have to pay a bit more. But it's not like he doesn't have great keeper value, because he was drafted, so he's not like a 16th round keeper. Mayer, no one's gonna even want to trade for, and he doesn't have good keeper value either. He's just sort of there in case he breaks out. Singletary is an interesting one, because from the beginning, I drafted Singletary at the very end of the draft, because it was documented that Dameon Pierce has had just efficiency struggles at the end of last year for the last handful of weeks. And, did they bring in Singletary to be a backup, or is he sort of like an insurance plan, right? In case Pierce can't get things going. And Pierce hasn't gotten things going. And Singletary had a breakout week last week. It took a long time. It's not it's not a guy I could keep for 10 weeks. But I think he's a great guy to have. He's not really someone that he's not really a keeper. I wouldn't even consider keeping him next year, but that's just me. I could be totally wrong, but I wouldn't be keeping him next year. But he could have one of those Jerick McKinnon-like endings to the season where he's a stud for the rest of the season, but it's just going to be underrated. So should he get shipped? Yes, but I don't think McGovern's going to get a price. He's not going to get it's sort of like Collins in the sense that he's not going to get the price he wants, and no one's going to be willing to pay what he's worth. And I think McGovern might want a little bit more than what he's worth too. So there's going to be, I wouldn't see two sides really being able to come to an agreement there, but that's just my thoughts and how, I guess, projecting how I would try and bid for him, right? Because I'd love to have him on my team, but what am I really willing to pay? You know, there's not much I'm willing to pay. Maybe just like a mid-round pick swap. But that's pretty much it. Jameson Williams has some news. Takes step in right direction. Yeah, no drops, right? No breakout, blah, 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 blah. Career high 52% of the snaps. Key blocks. I heard about he's been blocking better, which is huge. Oh yeah, it even says it right here. First, he has to improve as a blocker first. So that is, again, document. That's a third time I've used the word documented. So, Jameson Williams is kind of strange. It depends. I don't think there's really much. I don't think he can do enough to solidify himself as a solid keeper for next year. So he's kind of in no man's land, because what's the best case, right? He has a like a Christian Watson type end of the year where he just goes off for, you know, at 30 points for a handful of games. And that wasn't, I mean, yeah, Chris kept Watson, but it was somewhat exciting in a way. Like, there was definitely some hype for him, but it was definitely known to be like a risky pick. And Jameson Williams was a 10th rounder this year, I believe. Yeah, right there. So 10th round. So there's really not a whole ton of value you could get. So I don't see him getting kept. Kyle Pitts will be kept for sure. He was 16th round keeper this year. Even despite, he's one of those guys, McGovern's just going to keep him. But maybe he won't. I mean, he has plenty of guys to choose from, but I do think Kyle Pitts gets kept. A-Chain will definitely get kept. I really thought Atwell was going to have more activity, I guess. He's going to be more involved than he is when Cup came back. I thought Puka would see a little bit more of a hit, but Tutu would still, because he has a unique role. Like, Tutu has the role that's different from the others, but it's also, I guess, a product of Matt Stafford and the way Matt Stafford plays. So it could be what it is, but that's the end of the lineup here. I mean, I skipped over Demercado. He's a non-factor. He's going to be hitting the waivers now. Especially he had no touches here. He didn't play here, did he? And he was inactive. But it's James Conner. He's back. So Demercado is going to be hitting the pine. So Trevor Lawrence is just that's brutal. This has been like worse than what you see in waivers. So that's a failed keeper. So it's pretty much just a McGovern season. That's definitely a tough one. But he can maybe spoil a game here or there. I think he has a couple matchups against teams that are in the playoff hunt. So with this, a couple of these guys are boom candidates. So he could give someone an unfortunate loss. But he's got some decent keepers. Not loaded with extreme value like a whole bunch of 16th rounders, but guys you can keep in the middle the round when you're starting to reach a little bit for the guys like when you get to like the 9th round-ish kind of area. So he's got some guys you can keep around there that could be solid for next year. But I understand why he's looking for picks. I'd also be considering if anyone's willing to trade you like a solid keeper, but also I don't know if anyone's really willing to trade a solid keeper for any of the guys here. So like, do you trade a Nico Collins for let's just take a gander here. Let's take a look at like Elliott's team. Does he have anyone that's do you trade him for a guy like Charbonnet, who not even that. Basically, I was going to try and find an example of a guy who could be one or two guys, basically prospects that could be good keepers that are kept at late round value that would be, worth keeping over some of his existing guys at good value, but it's a little bit hard to find that. So those are definitely tougher trades to put through. But I do think they should be considered. That was going to be my plan when I thought I was going to have to sell this year. And so my plan was to try and sell either CD, Devontae, or both of them for like after week 1 or week 2. My plan was, okay, I'm going to trade at some point when, Cooper Kupp comes back. I'm going to trade Morganelli, Devontae Adams for Puka Nacua. Puka's going to be a good keeper next year, but Devontae Adams will surely be, a big step up in the wide receiving department that can get him more points guaranteed than Puka will, but Puka has better value next year. I thought that was just like a trade that I had formulated in my head like week 1, week 2, when I eventually was going to need to sell, but that didn't come to fruition. I do think it's a viable strategy, because I also wasn't expecting to have much in the way of keepers. So anyone who's willing to explore that avenue, who's doesn't have the keepers necessarily that they want, but has some players that are worth trading, I think that's something that's worth considering as well, because that's what I was gonna do. But just my thoughts there. But I think McGovern's in a good spot to keep a few guys for next year. I think but I definitely get wanting to have a bunch of picks too, just to hog a bit of the early draft capital. So that's totally fine. But yeah, so I think at that point we have one declared seller, and Robert he's sold some guys, so he's basically a seller. We have Jay, who's explicitly said that he's not selling. Freaky is not selling, and none of these guys are selling. So it's a very dry market. There's really not a whole ton there, as far as elite talent. Not a whole ton there to trade for, because Robert traded Ayuk. Ayuk to me was like the last piece of reliable talent left. Though you could definitely argue Amari Cooper is there. I perennially underrated Amari Cooper, but yeah, maybe someone trades for him. I don't know what the asking price is, but Najee Harris is now number 2. Sutton has been good, but it's one of those not Nico Collins, I guess, but because he's not like boom or bust. He's been very consistent, but it's hard to pay for a guy who has pretty limited upside, which is Cortland Sutton. Like he's not gonna boom, but he has a good floor. He's good. He's a guy I'd want on my team, but I can't really pay for him, and I don't know who I'd put him in over for other than being a depth piece. And I think there's a lot of competing teams that are in the same kind of boat. The last piece would basically be like I said, Amari Cooper. Someone could get Shiesty and try and trade for Dak Prescott, because he would be a decent keeper. I think I drafted him in the 13th or 14th round, 13th round. So yeah, there's a little bit there, but other than that, it's scraping by in here. Not a lot of trade options, so it might be a very quiet. I thought it was gonna be a crazy trade deadline, because I thought there was gonna be. I thought at some point Jay was gonna sell, and I thought it was gonna be everyone bidding out the ass to try and get like supremely overpaying for the likes of Josh Jacobs or James Conner. There's no way he was gonna trade Travis Kelce. He's still a viable keeper for next year. But yeah, that's sort of what I think the trade deadline is at. I thought it was going to be a lot of people bidding. I thought he was going to get a haul and a half for some of his guys, but he definitely needed T. Higgins to have a healthy, strong showing before the trade deadline, which he didn't have. So now his value's down, and so it's that part's kind of tough. But anyway, yeah. So that's where we're at with. I think that takes care of. Did I get his team off of here? I did. So we can get the Wheel of Names right out of here. And we'll revisit that next week. And then we can move on to power rankings. So you can see sort of, right next to me here, the little Stacks basement is empty now. It's a little gray box. So who's in the basement? We don't know who's in the basement. I don't know exactly who I want to put in the basement. As it stands, it's close. It's definitely, do we go draft pick fan club or do we go Stacks? I think as far as boom candidates, there are more at this point. There are more boom candidates on Robert's team because the Cowboys have figured out if they just throw the ball to CeeDee Lamb and they're letting Dak cook, which I thought would be a bad strategy, but it's a good strategy. Well, no, let me rephrase that. So I think getting the ball to CeeDee Lamb is a good strategy because CeeDee Lamb is like always open and he can make contested grabs. But I think letting Dak cook is a little. I wouldn't have expected it to turn out the way that it did with just these insane overall QB1 numbers he's been putting up. So I guess I could see someone putting in a bid for him at some point, maybe trying to swap some picks with Robert for that. But yeah, that's maybe I should do that. But I like CJ Stroud, so I don't know if I want to. We'll see. There might be some good matchups. Actually, let me really quick. I'll do this on screen so everyone can beat me to the punch. So what you have for playoff matchups, you have a shootout versus Buffalo, shootout versus Miami, potential shootout versus Detroit in the finals. That is actually pretty spicy. That's spicy. Hang on. All right, you guys are going to see what my plans are. See, that's not spicy, but that's not the playoffs. That's like not that spicy for CJ Stroud. Do I want to upgrade maybe to a? Is it really upgrading? Am I really in this spot? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can. What am I? I don't know. I don't know. I'll have to do that. I'm gonna do that when I'm off. When I'm off this podcast here or whatever, the Kraken power rankings. Anyway, so basement. This is still a little bit loud there. All right, maybe I'll just stop the music. This is a little too distracting. So I think as far again down to the basement, I don't think I put Robert in the basement anymore. I do think it's draft pick fan club, and I think it'll be that way. Draft pick fan club. I think it'll stay that way once if McGovern's able to sell anybody, then I think it will definitely confirm that. So then that means I put Stacks here. Oops, there we go. Let me change my grip there. There we go. Stacks. Let's connect that. Stacks. There we go. So congratulations to Robert for getting out of the basement. I'm going to rewrite that. And you are now a Purple Warrior. Stacks. There we go. So, yeah, it is the year Stacks went nuclear, but he was just on the receiving end of the nuclear impact. So, moving on from there, who do we have next? It's basically McDonald's. Jay's team is better than both these teams. It's 0-10. I understand this team is better than either of those two other teams. Because there are he's just had he's had such horrible injuries. It's crazy. But what I will say is I'm not trying to be too harsh, but I think Jay could have done a better job at going for free agent wide receivers throughout the season. But that just is what it is, right? Yes, he's had some wide receiving bad luck with Deontay going out, with Mike Williams going out, with T. Higgins being injured a lot, Jerry Jeudy not performing. But there have been players on other teams that that have been taken off free agency. Let's just take a look at Morganelli. Like, Puka was a free agent. You can't really put Puka in there. He was taken really early. But, Brandon Cooks has been sitting out there for a while. Morganelli just got him. But he's had a couple of good outings, and he has a soft as hell schedule. Someone that I would be taking over some of the guys that are sitting on the bench now, like Jerick McKinnon. Like, McKinnon has proven that he's not really there anymore. Quentin Johnston is a guy that you could take a chance on, and he's been ramping things up as of late. Not a great example, but some guys that could have some potential. Let's take a look at Freaky's team. I think Dobbs was drafted, Jacoby was drafted, Wandale. That's kind of tough. So that's not a good example. I had him and I thought he would be good. But oh man, this is not a good example. All right. let's take a look here. So I got Tank Dell off free agency early on, though I think that was also added from waivers. Yeah, that was before the season even started. But like Kyle Phillips was a guy I've been watching for weeks, right? I saw him come back, and he's been on my radar. I've been watching. He's had like low but increasing snap counts, and his targets on like his routes run, and just watching the games as a guy I would have taken. If I'm Jay, I would have taken him a couple weeks ago. Maybe last week, or was it last week or the week before? Something like that. But like Demario Douglas, a guy I got off free agency not that long ago. Yeah, beginning of October. And like I said, Phillips. McBride he doesn't need a tight end, so that's not really a good point. But I just picked up Darrell Henderson today. He's better than an existing flex. Josh Downs has been on my team for a while, but I added him, dropped him, and added him back again. So there have been guys that other teams have gotten. Like look at over here. Until until KJ Osborne got injured, he was a viable fill-in while Jefferson was out. Those are a couple 8-point outings, a 15-point outing. Not great, but these are guys that I would still rather have that could be serviceable, right? So maybe it's a little bit unfair for me to bring some of those up because those aren't great replacements. But I know Chris has gotten some waiver wire magic, and it's happened multiple times. Gus Edwards, Kareem Hunt, Dante Foreman, Taysom Hill, and Leonard Fournette hasn't done anything yet. But that's like 4 guys off of free agency that have directly contributed to Chris being in second place right now. So I guess and I think Jake has had some good waiver wire pickups too. He might have just been trades though. Yeah, mostly just trades. So not great there. But even Robert, I think might have had no. I like Khalil Shakir, who could have been picked up, but yeah, I guess those aren't great guys. Robert Woods has been injured, so yeah, and I guess not a ton, but I think the point is that there have been some that have been good fill-ins. I think most is what I've seen on it's a little bit biased, but I guess my own roster for wide receiver fill-ins. So like over here, Keaton Mitchell, that is just an absolute heartbreaker. I did not want to drop him, but I couldn't at the time. Couldn't drop Miles Sanders. Couldn't drop I liked the way my team was at, and I thought Miles Sanders had better chance at reclaiming a number 1 role. That was clear misstep, and that's super painful. But so I guess that's a little bit of a tangent on Jay's team. I still think that he could have made something happen, but it just didn't work out that way. So I could be wrong, and I'll probably get flamed for it by Jay, and maybe other people too. Maybe I'm probably being a little unfair, but in any case, I do think McDonald's, and there are also guys that aren't on rosters right now that have sort of been picked up, dropped, back and forth, that have had good weeks, but just not on current rosters now. And I just don't have the time to go through each and every player and cherry pick like, oh, this guy was the winner here and this guy could have been good there. But like if we look at all transactions, and we sort of know this anyway, with Jay doesn't have a whole ton of acquisitions on the year. It took there's a big gap here, but this was just a part of the offseason trade, but just not a whole ton here for filling in some of those spots. This was like his big spending week. He got Zeke. That was a good move. I think picking up Zeke was a good move. I don't even want to talk about Zeke. Zeke was why I lost Keaton Mitchell. I thought I needed him as a backup to Ramondre, and then I realized pretty much right after that was pointless. But anyway, here we are. So that's how I feel. Oh, I've missed the other L. There we go. That's fine. All right. So here that represents a tier shift. So we're going to come out of there, and we're going to jump into the next tier of teams, back to blue. And I think this is always the toughest part. I think we're starting to see a little bit of a split because you have some teams that are questionable, right? You have teams that could perform well, but we've gotten so far into the season that are they bad or have they been unlucky? And I think the first we have to look at is Freaky's team. It's an enigma what's been happening to Freaky's team this year. Burrow had a slow start, so he trades for Tua and gives up Javonte. Thank you. He also AJ Brown for Tony Pollard. At the time, there was a lot of I swear I heard some opinions of that was a steal for Freaky. How could you possibly give up a number one running back for a wide receiver that is on a team where there's a lot of running? Yeah, Jalen Hurts passes a lot, but Devontae Smith was. This is earlier on in the season where Devontae Smith was putting up huge numbers every week. Is A.J. Brown going to be able to be the dominant wide receiver one at a position like wide receiver that has a lot more talent than you get a guy who's a starting running back? So there was a lot of thoughts that Freaky might have won that deal. Turns out it might have been one of the biggest fleeces of the season where Tony Pollard has just been absolute hot garbage. And Elliott has acquired A.J. Brown, who solidified his wide receiver room and is an elite option who's been putting up like record-breaking numbers for the most part. That has been those two trades combined. It's like every manager's biggest fear when making trades is that kind of thing happens where you trade away the guys who do the best and you end up hurting yourself a lot in the end. And I think that's what's happened with Freaky here. So it stinks, but and he also had some injuries too, like Kyron Williams, though he didn't start off as the starter. Obviously, it became a huge piece of his team. Darren Waller, who was kind of but then started stringing together some good weeks, and he's back on IR. Khalil Herbert, who was doing well early on, and he's been on IR for forever. Seems like forever now. So he's had some bad luck too. But those trades definitely brought him down. So where it stands right now, is this a great team? Sun God is great. Jahmyr Gibbs is great. Tony Pollard should be, but he's just not getting it done. Tyreek Hill needs to be that last. Imagine if he just kept AJ Brown. You have Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, AJ Brown. And then you're talking about flexing Jacoby Myers, Zay Flower, like Romeo Dobbs. I mean, that would be a good team. That would be a good team. But again, if we're judging it as it is, I think this is still a very solid team. And it's not a team that I would be excited to play against. So putting it ninth, we'll have to wait and see. We compare it. The next logical comparison is moving up the standings is looking at Jake's team. Justin Fields, I think, is coming back this week, right? Expected to start versus Lions. So it's really going to come down to how does Justin Fields perform? Does he do this Justin Fields or does he do this Justin Fields? I don't know. And that's the biggest thing here. But speaking of fleeces, I mean, this is a small under the radar one. Trading away Keontae Ingram for Brock Purdy. Has worked out really well for Jake. He's filled in quite nicely while Fields is out. Again, I mean, it's not too much to say about that. This is a good wide receiving room. Evans has these blow-up games, and he also has a pretty consistent floor. Definitely his best wide receiver. And then he just traded for Ayuk, which I really like Brandon Ayuk. He's very, very good, but on a loaded team who has to compete with Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle for touches. So I do like him. I think that was I think it was a slight overpay, but it might not. I mean, it's just as it stands right now. If this helps him win a championship, then it's absolutely not an overpay. But I think I think it's just a little bit much for Ayuk, but it's also the other thing to note is that it's a very, very dry market. So you kind of have to overpay for the guys that you want. So I have nothing bad to say about that. I think that makes his team more solid. And then you just have Eckler. The weakness is still at running back. We just got to see what the Bills do with James Cook. They fired their offensive coordinator. My guess is that they want to give Cook more touches. I think the overuse of Latavius Murray is criminal. I don't know. I don't like it. But I know Cook's fumbled, right? But is that how many fumbles does he have on the year? Is what I want to know. Fumbles lost. One. He's lost one fumble all year. So it's not like this is a fumble-prone guy. He's not a big dude that is gonna pound his way into the end zone, but he can find holes. So they should be using him more. I think they will use him more. We'll see what ends up happening, but I think he'll put up wide receiver or RB2 numbers. This trade for Laporta, I absolutely loved for Jake. He got a higher pick, got Laporta, and just gave away DK, but again, that might just be because I don't like DK. So maybe that's why I think it's such a good trade. But I think just getting one of the best tight ends available is really good. Rashee Rice should continue to see more and more snaps. And if God forbid anything happens to Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice is going to be the guy for sure. Addison, at this point, you're talking his fifth wide receiver. Sixth, if you count Olave. I mean, he's just got a lot. He can play matchups with his wide receivers, which is really good. So the real question is just questionable running back depth and lack of a bona fide wide receiver one. But I think he's sort of supplementing that like with very strong flexes. These are very strong flexes. Good tight end. I think this is a strong team, but again, doesn't have that. I mean, yeah, you could. I know Hopkins had that huge outburst, but doesn't have that, Tyreek level threat. It doesn't have that, Saint Brown, sun god type of player. But I guess Eckler is that home run threat, right? But he's 20. I mean, these are great numbers, but his efficiency is just not there where he can get a crap load of yards and a couple touchdowns, right? So his ceiling is basically at like 25, probably 25 points. Ceiling is 30 points, but yeah, I wouldn't expect to see him get more than 25 in any game. But yeah, it's a solid team. I think he'll be putting up good numbers. I think it's pretty on par with Freaky's team. So I think we just have to keep going before we can start writing them down, because I don't know which way I would order them yet. They are definitely in the same tier, but Zach's team, I don't know. Things are not looking great over here. We'll see what happens when Justin Fields comes back, but DJ Moore has fallen off quite a bit from that 50-point performance. Just really not doing a whole lot. Those are flex numbers. Barkley is in the middle of a non-existent offense, so he's going to be basically touchdown dependent, right? Like, it's going to be really tough for him to do anything. But what other guys do we have here? Pittman, I do love some Pittman. Yeah, that's a very solid player there. Hopefully Josh Downs, for my sake, eats into that a little bit. Diggs will come back. Diggs just had an off week. I think this wide receiving room is still really good. And there are no problems there. Just there's very questionable quarterback room. I like Will Levis. I honestly watched a bunch of this game. I watched some of this game because I was in the hospital. And he looked pretty good there. I think the numbers just didn't reflect that. But I think it's just a little bit. It's definitely concerning that he wasn't able to put up many yards against Tampa Bay. But maybe they actually, on a defensive note, turned things around and really reviewed some tape after CJ Stroud shredded them for 470 yards in the air. And so it's either bad for Will Levis that he wasn't able to get even remotely close to that, or it was good on Tampa Bay for being able to make some corrections. So we'll have to see how that goes. So I liked Will Levis. Gotta get your guy. I'm a little bit nervous now. He hasn't really come close to repeating that performance from his first start. So he's definitely not a bust. Yeah, it's way too early for that. But he might be. I'd be looking to see next year what they do, or if he just turns things around. But yeah, it's just a very questionable quarterback room. So it really limits your upside, because your quarterback's supposed to be your floor, where you get a solid amount of points each week. And when that gets thrown into question, you need boom performances from everybody else to even make it to average. So he's definitely been feeling that struggle lately. We'll see if it comes back, but this team is looking a lot weaker than it did, just a few weeks ago. So I don't know. I think it might be a fall from grace, but if I'm looking at these teams at present, moving forward, I think of all of them, I'm actually dropping Zach all the way down to 9th. It's just it's upsetting. It's upsetting to watch. Zach deserves better, but it's just maybe maybe he trades for Dak. Maybe Zach trades for Dak Prescott here and really, I don't know what he's willing to shell out, and I don't know what Robert's gonna want. If I'm Robert, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't want to give away too much, but that I think that would help is all I would say, and I don't think there's anyone who would disagree that Dak Prescott would be an upgrade from the current quarterback room here. So that's just my personal opinion on it. But before starting to throw everyone else in here, 1,000 points against, 1,072. So Jenny is definitely, I think Jenny did this last year too. Had a few points against, but I could be wrong. But let's take a look at week 10. A very weak performance, but another win for Jenny against Zach. With putting up 107 points. This is very much like how the beginning of my season started, where I was not putting up great numbers, but I was able to squeak out a few wins. But Brees Hall, yeah, he got fed, but they kept him in check. Zach Wilson's not a threat. If Aaron Rodgers does come back mid-December, then maybe Brees's numbers come back up a little bit. Kamara's not getting the same usage he got before. I didn't watch any of this game. I do know that Jameis Winston came in, so I don't know if that affected anything. And I know Taysom Hill didn't do much, but Taysom Hill is just like a red zone vulture, which caps Kamara's upside too. So Kamara is definitely right now the best player on the team. Yeah, there's no Cooper Kupp, but what's he really done other than that one game? I guess 2 games, but really struggled as of late. That's going to be a big factor on whether or not this is a good team moving forward. That's pretty much number one thing, is this going to be a good team going forward. So Pickens, I really thought he was breaking out here. I really liked Pickens from a player standpoint. I know I complained about him as a person, but I thought as a player, maybe he's just inconsistent. We'll see. Back end wide receiver 3. Yeah, it seems pretty fair. It does seem fair. Juju Smith-Schuster does not belong in a lineup, so that he should be gone. I think she already dropped him, so he's gone. Mandrews, just a bad game. There's a lot of these guys just had bad games too. My tune could totally change if Brees Hall just goes off for another monster week. He's normally a very efficient back, and this is just an inefficient week, so we'll see what happens. But the depth is suspect. Keaton Mitchell should be very, very solid moving forward. Solid is not the right word. Very high ceiling. But, guys like, I think Chris Godwin was sick or something like that. So, I'm sure you just can't. When your team scores 37 points and you have 2.6, I don't know if he was injured for that game, honestly. I feel like he wasn't, but that's not good. He's clearly the number 2 guy behind Mike Evans, and 3, I guess, if you count Rachaad White. But yeah, it's a scary wide receiver room, especially if Cooper Kupp isn't there. So, I'm gonna move some things around real quick. I honestly would rather have Zach's team. Oops. Whoa. We can't have that. We cannot have that. We're going to move this to there. Oh, I guess I have. Oh, I know why. It's because of that. You guys can't see it, can you? No, you can't. What happens now if I move it? This should help. There it is. Okay. And then I'm going to go back to here. Change this brush. I'm going to put it to next year. Yeah, we'll do that. All right. Now, we're moving up. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think at this point, I have to start putting in. Where does my team fit in here? I'll be honest. I am really starting to like my team a lot. I think this is gonna be a tough week because like everyone's on bye, but Stevenson's schedule finally softened and it's getting better for the rest of the season. This was a tough stretch, but I feel like you just look at the numbers, especially as of late. Yeah, that one dud against Miami, but these are. I mean, he's my flex. He's my flex. He's an RB2/flex. These are good. These are good numbers. This one was anchored by like a 65-yard run or something like that. But this volume is outstanding. He's getting the targets, getting the looks. He's fine. Getting Jonathan Taylor, he's the number one back, and Zach Moss is pretty much phased out, which was, as I said before, something that I needed. And that was what I was banking on when I traded away a first for him. So I just need his efficiency to come back up. And I don't know how that's going to work out. It'd be better if they had Anthony Richardson so that they didn't have to just stack the box, because Richardson would be able to hit the outsides in his runs and just keep the defenders honest. And if you're running like options, something like that, then you could get Taylor to have a lot more efficiency. But I don't think that would be a huge hit to downs. I know from a lot of what I've said is, Minshew loves to throw to downs. Minshew. Richardson was throwing to him too. Richardson just didn't throw as much. But Josh Downs, I think, is just, he's there. He's their number 2 wide receiver behind Pittman. And I'm excited for him to be back and fully healthy. Rashid Shaheed, now that Michael Thomas is probably going to be, they say he's not out for season necessarily, but I think you can't trust him in fantasy for the rest of the season. That's for sure. Rashid Shaheed is fine depth. I probably wouldn't need to play him unless I had to. Demario Douglas is New England's wide receiver 1 for whatever that's worth. Though it could just be, Ramondre could be wide receiver 1. Just depends on what they want to do. And then I have a handcuff in Jaleel in case something happens to Javonte. So, if something happens to Jonathan Taylor, kind of screwed. If something happens to Ramondre, not as screwed, because I still have 2 good running backs that I can play every week. And then I can just flex with like a wide receiver that I like. So I overall, and I look at the boom candidates of CeeDee Lamb, Tank Dell is kind of a boom candidate. I mean, he has some big games. I think he has a more solid floor, honestly, than people give him credit for. I'm a big fan. And I love CJ Stroud. I love Javonte. I love Trey McBride. He could be a top 5 tight end. Just watching the tape, not just the numbers, not just looking at like box score or anything like that. You watch the game, he is the best receiver on that field, and it's not even close. It's not. It is close. Hollywood Brown is very good, but he's not. I think McBride is their best receiving asset on that team, but I don't know about his blocking. I did watch some of him, and I watched like his catches and stuff, but I did not watch enough of his blocking. But he's going to be a better blocker than Zach Ertz. And he has better yards after catch. He's that kind of guy than Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz was good at getting open, and he was quick, but yards after catch, he got tackled pretty easily a lot of the time. And McBride is an absolute beast. So loving him there. Depth pieces. So I think, starting lineup, like this team a lot. I think it's come a lot further than I was expecting it to. So I'm not willing to put them at 7th right now. And I think that right now we're sort of in the mud of things. But I think now is really a good chance to, how long have I been doing this? I think I've been on here for almost an hour. So I gotta wrap up. But Nolan's team is tough because I do really like it, and I think it has a lot of depth. But like this Derrick Henry floor, 2 games below 3 is scary. Another one there is pretty low. I think he should be fine, but we'll see. I mean, that was just an awkward game. I think it'll be better down here. But Spears is also a threat. Spears looks really good, but it's also Derrick Henry. So I don't know. I really don't know what the outcome is for Derrick Henry. It's a question mark. Joe Mixon is going to be a low efficiency, but with high touchdown potential. So good floor guy there. And then Kenneth Walker rips off, I feel like one big, it's kind of like ETN and where he'll just like rip off one long play and then make everything else look okay for it. So, but he's good. He's a solid guy. I'd like to have him in the flex. Pacheco is good. Njoku's fine. Like, this is a solid team. And you have Josh Allen at the helm, right? He's gonna have, this matchup against the Jets, but then that week 13 bye. This will be a shootout. I think he'll be, as the owner of the KC defense, I'm not looking forward to that. He'll be good in the playoffs. I think this is a solid team. Not really a whole ton else to say about it that I haven't already said before. The team hasn't really changed too much. So, but last week was kind of weak. The week before he also had he had an okay showing. That's pretty good. 130 is good. So it's really just last week, I guess, that was kind of a weak one. So I think if I'm looking at it, there's a lot of strong teams. So I'm going to do this. I think I'm starting to get an idea of how I view the teams. I think Antonio Gibson's Hitman Reborn goes here. Let me think. I think I'm going to put Jake here, but this could change. This all depends on Fields. If Fields is a QB1, Jake moves up to like here, because everything else in that team is solid. There's really, it's quarterback is questionable. It's not even that bad. It's pretty good. But where does he go here? Does Nolan come down here? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think Nolan's fine here, in this range. Right. So it'd be, now basically I have to pick, who do I like more between my team and Nolan's. I think, Elliott, Chris, Morganelli are up around here. I think Morganelli I like Morganelli's team over my team. Let's take a look at Chris's team real quick before I move on from this, because I cannot put my finger on this team. I really don't like it, but it continues to perform. It's one of those, it almost feels like a Moneyball kind of team, which I don't think was the intent, but like a Gus Edwards, Kareem Hunt, Donta Foreman. I mean, just like, he's gotten elite production from some of these waiver guys that are temporary. Like, they're not going to be holding these jobs forever. I guess Kareem Hunt will hold that job, because he's splitting with Ford. He's just getting a million touchdowns. Like, he's outperforming for sure. Gus Edwards, he's not losing his job. He's not losing his job to Mitchell. He'll stay. Gus Edwards will stay. Justice Hill will be gone, and it'll be Edwards and Mitchell in there. Aaron Jones got his job back, sorta. Like, but those are good touches. AJ Dillon had a good game too. But again, what happens with Bijan? Are they finally going to use Bijan? Those are his most carries, right? Most carries of the season didn't really get used. So he's a question mark. Hawkinson is an elite top 3 tight end, possibly even higher. He could be top 1. He could even be better than Kelsey, I think, at this point. Not for skill set wise, but because of Josh Dobbs loves throwing to tight ends. We saw that with Hawkinson last week, and I saw it with McBride a couple weeks before that. So, but Lamar has a wide range of outcomes. I mean, he's boom or bust. So it's tough. Keenan Allen's a beast too. It's one of those. I personally, maybe it's just my bias is now starting to come out that I like my team better at this point in time. But it's got to be my bias, because I have like no faith in Metcalf, but he got 12, 14 targets, but then he got like 4 targets here. I mean, it's not, I don't know. That's a tough one, but I think when I start getting around to this area, my feelings on it are that I would put Nolan's team here. James White babies. I would put my team here. Do I? Do I actually? Do I actually think? I think Chris's team has more potential than mine, though, because if Lamar Jackson, like a lot of these guys have higher ceilings. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we'll do that there. I'm gonna do crew, but here's where things change a little bit. Here's where I have a bit of a tier shift, right? And I'm gonna give this a different color. I'm gonna go to green because now I look at. I think there's a clear cut here. And we'll see once, with Jefferson coming back, we'll see how he jives with Josh Dobbs. I think he'll be fine. Only slight, maybe like 3 or 4 points per game worse than with Kirk, though. And those ceiling games are going to be way lower. So maybe he gets a hit, but he's still a wide receiver 1, an elite wide receiver 1. You pair that with Mahomes. I think Mahomes has a pretty good schedule. No. But I mean, Mahomes doesn't really care about like these numbers. He's Mahomes. There's nothing, not worried about that at all. ETN, if Brian Robinson keeps doing, I mean, this team has just so many threats. And Dalton Schultz, he was a guy I remember thinking early, like before the season started, is a guy that I thought could be a sneaky guy. Given rookie quarterback with an run game, and the wide receiving room was Nico Collins, who hadn't jumped out yet. Robert Woods and a rookie Tank Dell. Dalton Schultz could be that big-bodied safety blanket that was being drafted pretty late. Yeah, 13th round. So I thought he'd be a sneaky guy. He was bad early on, but now he's really turned it on. And he's flex worthy. And so he has Kittle, who, I mean, yeah, he had a big touchdown here, which sort of inflates the numbers, but these targets don't lie. We don't know exactly what he'll do because he's boom or bust too. Like, he's just been booming kind of frequently, but like those games are kind of scary. So, but either way, he's a big threat. ETN's a big threat. Brian Robinson's now a big threat. Devontae Smith, with especially Dallas Goedert out, is going to get even a larger share of passes, I bet. Puka has been Puka. Jefferson will be back. Like, this team is threats top to bottom. Rashad White, I mean, as it stands right now, this is probably my number 1 team. I would put Kraken combined tour. I think that the difference maker is Jefferson. And he's not going to be able to keep Jefferson next year, so I think we're finally going to I'm tired of seeing Morgan Elliott at the top of the power rankings every damn year, but that's just where it's been. And so we get to Elliott. It's cool. I mean, Elliott has an elite team. Maybe I'm wrong here, but right now Morgan Elliott is I think he has just more guys that can boom, but Elliott's guys that can boom can go really, really boom, like CMC, AJ Brown, Jamar Chase, Jalen Hurts. All these guys can boom. Actually, I don't know. No. This is a fake. It's a fake out. I can't. I can't do it. I don't think I can put Morgan Elliott's team up here. It just doesn't feel right. Elliott's team is just that good. Just Jalen Hurts and Jamar Chase is just. Yes, these games happen for some weird reason, but Jamar Chase is that guy, and he has a good floor. I mean, that is a floor, and his ceiling is through the roof. Hollywood Brown, I think this is an outlier. I think he'll be fine with Murray back. So they're just probably getting they're getting basically practice reps right now. He'll be fine. AJ Brown is an elite wide receiver 1. CMC didn't have a touchdown this game. He still put up 20 points. And Kincaid is now a TE1. Noah Brown, the Texans and CJ Stroud are making him look amazing. Mostert is It sort of drops off from there, but this is just like really, really good top to bottom. So I think Elliott, it's close, but I think Jew MC holds the top spot for one more week. He's going to hold the top spot, but That's where we are now. I know I don't really cover defenses, but I think, yeah, that does feel a bit better. And yeah, that is it. Those are our power rankings. Definitely some movers in there. I think, Chris has been, in about the same spot. I had my team move up. A lot of the other ones have moved in the midfield, have been kind of sitting in their spot for a while. So I guess maybe not too much of a shakeup. Getting Stacks out of the basement is probably one of the biggest moves. So I think it's about time to wrap things up here. This is probably a longer power rankings than normal. So as always, hope you guys have personal good weeks, shitty fantasy weeks, and I look forward to winning the championship this year. See you later.